Established in 1908, the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest near Sparks, Nevada, just outside Reno, is the largest national forest in the lower 48 states at more than 6 million acres, spread across portions of Nevada and eastern California. According to the USDA Forest Service, crowning the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest is Mount Charleston, at a height of nearly 12,000 feet. In May of 1966, a 6-year-old Larry Jeffrey was in Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest, near Mount Charleston, with his family when the youngster disappeared while he was playing with siblings. Based on a report at the time from the Desert Sun, once Jeffrey's parents reported him missing, teams of up to 1,000 men scoured the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest for 16 days. Despite that intensive manhunt in an area where temperatures sometimes top 100 degrees and late spring snow is common, Larry Jeffrey was never found. Missing persons cases in national parks and national forests are not rare. As recently as 2017, there were nearly 600 search and rescue missions in the Lake Mead National Recreation Area in Nevada. That number at Lake Mead is followed by Grand Canyon National Park at nearly 300 search and rescue missions that same year. Based on the data from National Parks Traveler, although firm data on just how many people go missing in national parks and forests is hard to come by, some missing persons cases in national parks go unresolved, as they sometimes do when people disappear under any other circumstance, with nearly 30 cold missing person cases in national parks dating back in the 1950s. When Larry Jeffrey disappeared, 3 possible explanations were abduction, an attack from a predator, or an accident in the rugged terrain at Humboldt-Toyabe. Authorities explored every single possible lead. Larry Jeffrey, who was hard of hearing, went missing at the end of May, and as late as June 7 there were still 100 highly trained men scouring the area for signs of the boy. To no avail, as the Desert Sun reported at the time. To add to the mystery, there are really no large predators in the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest. Around that same time, the search and rescue mission was called off. The Jeffrey family was also in a particular remote area of the forest without road access. When Larry went missing, that ruled out abduction, according to retired Sheriff Larry Lamb, who worked on the case, speaking with Class TV in 2012. "We walked shoulder to shoulder but couldn't find him," said the sheriff. "It was as if Larry Jeffrey of Henderson, Nevada had simply walked into oblivion," Lamb said. "It's not uncommon for missing persons and especially children to show up alive or dead long distances from where they disappeared. The search for Larry Jeffrey lasted more than 2 weeks, but the boy was never found, and until this day, we are not aware of what happened to Larry." On June 13, 1969, William Martin brought his 2 sons, Douglas and Dennis Martin, and his father Clyde on a camping trip. It was Father's Day weekend, and the family planned to hike through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The hike was a family tradition for the Martins, and the first day went smoothly. 6-year-old Dennis managed to keep up with the more experienced hikers. The Martins met up with family friends on the second day and continued to Spence Field, a highland meadow in the western Smokies popular for its views. As the adults gazed at the scenic mountain laurel, the boys snuck off to pull a prank on the parents, but it did not go as planned. During the prank, Dennis vanished into the woods. His family never saw him again, and the child's disappearance would launch the largest search and rescue effort in the park's history. Dennis Martin set off on the hike wearing a red t-shirt. It was the 6-year-old's first overnight camping trip. The youngest in his family, Dennis, must have been excited to go on the annual Father's Day hike in the Smoky Mountains. But on the second day of the trip, tragedy struck. On June 14, 1969, the hikers reached Spence Field. After meeting up with another family, Dennis and his brother split off with two other boys to play together. William Martin watched as the children whispered a plan to sneak up on the adults. The boys melted into the forest, though Dennis's red shirt stood out against the greenery. Soon the older boys jumped out laughing, but Dennis was no longer with them. As the minutes ticked by, William knew something was wrong. He began calling for Dennis, confident the boy would respond, but there was no answer. The adults quickly searched the nearby forests, hiking up and down several trails, looking for Dennis. William covered miles of trails, frantically calling for Dennis. Without radios or any way to communicate with the outside world, the Martins came up with a plan. Clyde, Dennis's grandfather, hiked 9 miles to the Gates Cove Ranger Station for help. When night fell, a thunderstorm moved in. In a matter of hours, the storm dropped 3 inches of rain on the Smoky Mountains, washing out trails and leaving behind no evidence of Dennis Martin, whose footprints would have been swept away by the deluge. At 5 a.m. on June 15, 1969, the search for Dennis Martin commenced. The National Park Service put together a crew of 30. The search party quickly swelled to 240 people as volunteers poured in. The search party soon included park rangers, college students, firefighters, Boy Scouts, police, and 60 Green Berets. Without clear directions or an organizational plan, the searchers crossed the national park looking for evidence. And the search continued day after day with no sight of Dennis Martin. Helicopters and planes took to the air to search a growing patch of the national park. On June 20, Dennis's 7th birthday, nearly 800 people participated in the search. They included members of the Air National Guard, US Coast Guard, and the National Park Service. The next day, the search efforts peaked at an astonishing 1,400 searchers. A week into the search, the National Park Service put together a plan for what to do if they recovered Dennis's body. And yet over 3,000 hours of searching yielded nothing. Unfortunately, the volunteers may have accidentally destroyed clues about what happened to Dennis Martin. As the days flew past, it became more and more clear that the boy would not be found alive. The search and rescue effort gradually lost steam. With no sight of Dennis Martin, the Martin family offered a reward of $5,000 for information. In response, they received a flood of calls from psychics claiming to know what happened to their son. More than half a century later, no one knows what happened to Dennis Martin, the day he went missing in the Smoky Mountains. The most possible theories range from abduction to having died of exposure and eaten by a bear or feral pigs in the park. But some people believe Dennis Martin was the victim of a more vicious attack by cannibalistic feral humans who are said to live undetected in the national park. And the reason nothing was ever found of his body or clothing was because they were hidden far from view in the safety of their colony. For their part, Martin's family believes someone may have kidnapped their son. Harold Key was 7 miles from Spencefield the day Dennis Martin went missing. That afternoon, Key heard a sickening scream. Then Key spotted an unkempt stranger hurrying through the woods. Was the event connected with the disappearance? We will never know. The 6-year-old may have wandered off and found himself lost in the woods. The terrain marked with steep ravines may have hidden Martin's body, or wildlife might have attacked the child. Years after Dennis disappeared, a ginseng hunter found a child's skeleton about 3 miles downhill from where Dennis went missing. The man waited to report the skeleton since he had illegally taken ginseng from the national park. But in 1985, the ginseng hunter contacted a Park Service ranger. The ranger put together a group of 30 seasoned rescuers, but they could not find the skeleton. The mystery of Dennis Martin's disappearance will likely never be solved, despite the massive effort to find the missing boy. He was never to be found. Some mysterious unsolved vanishings are remarkable in just how little evidence and how few clues they have left behind. On some occasions, people just seem to walk off and keep on walking off the face of the earth, leaving little rhyme or reason behind. One notable case of this comes to us from 1971 when a young boy took a walk just a short distance and seems to have just evaporated off the face of the earth. In 1971, 8-year-old Douglas Legg went on a family trip to a place called Santanoni Estate, now called the Santanoni Preserve, near the town of Newcombe in the Adirondack Mountains of Essex, New York, also commonly called the Great Camps. The sprawling 12,500 acres estate was a popular summer resort for wealthy New Yorkers at the time and featured 40 buildings and a 24-room main lodge. The owners of the estate, the wealthy Melvin family, were relatives of the Leggs, and so they often made family trips there to enjoy the remote wilderness and serene vistas of the forests and lakes. On this particular occasion, it was to be the extended family's last trip there before the estate was due to be sold, but it would also be the last time anyone would ever see the little Douglas again. On July 10, 1971, Douglas went on a hike with his uncle. On a clear summer day for what was meant to be easy, short hike. As they walked along, at around 3:30 p.m., Douglas' uncle realized that they were probably going to encounter some poison ivy along the way. In fact, he had spotted patches of it as they walked, and noticing that Douglas was wearing short pants, his uncle told him to run back to camp and change into long pants. Although he was only 8 years old, the camp was just a short distance away, just a stone's throw, in fact, only around half a mile along a straight path. And despite his young age, he was very experienced being in the outdoors and had been to the camps many times before. As he ran off to go change his clothes, it would not have seemed like a particular abnormal thing. So it was with some surprise that the uncle waited and waited, but Douglas never came back. After some time waiting, Douglas's uncle went back to camp, where he learned that the boy's older brother had seen him near the main lodge building, but had thought nothing of it. One of the boy's cousins also claimed that he had seen Douglas near a nearby ridge, but again it hadn't seemed particularly strange. Indeed, everyone seemed to have thought that the boy was still with the uncle. When the uncle told them what had happened, they immediately fanned out to look for Douglas, calling out his name and sweeping the entire area, but there was no sign of him. As the evening approached and the temperature dropped, authorities were notified and an official search was launched. The ensuing search would be one of the largest the state of New York had ever seen, using helicopters, planes equipped with heat-detected infrared FLIR, search dogs, rangers, a mountain rescue team who flew in from Sierra Madre, California, and 1,000 volunteers, although it was described as not being particularly well organized and hampered by bad weather and treacherous terrain. Even psychics were brought in. At one point, a bloodhound picked up the boy's scent and followed it around for 30 miles over difficult terrain, choked with bushes and trees, which would have been nearly impossible for such a young child to have navigated on their own. Where the trail ended at a pond, which was subsequently tracked and even drained, but nobody was found. After that, the scent trail ended, as if he had just evaporated from the face of the earth. The search would go on for 6 weeks, searching every bush and crevice, even in areas that no 8-year-old would have been able to pass through, and dragging streams and lakes, but no further traces of the boy were found, not a single clue as to where he had gone or what had happened to him. He had seemingly just ceased to exist, It was at the time assumed that the boy had simply gotten lost in the wilderness and succumbed to the many bogs and swamps in the area. But in later years, some eerie clue would seem to refute this. In 1993, a woman came forward claiming that a relative of hers had killed Douglas Legg and dumped his body in a lake in Lewis County. She even showed authorities which specific lake it was, but there was no sign of any body found. And it was discovered that the woman was a psychiatric patient with false memory syndrome. That very same year, a Montana man would come forward to claim that he had been hunting in the area back in 1973 and had stumbled across some skeletal remains that could have been those of a child. But he had shied away from coming forward with the discovery at the time because he had been on Navy leave and not supposed to be hunting there at the time. Despite all of the time that had passed, the area was thoroughly searched to no avail. It is unknown just what he actually found or what connection it has to Douglas Legg's disappearance. Even more recently was a lead that came in 2020 when members of the New York State Police Troop B underwater recovery team were doing training at a lake in front of the Santanoni estate and came across an unidentified skull fragment. It was seen as an exciting new lead until it was analyzed and determined to be non-human. In the end, there have been no other possible leads, no new clues, and although the case is officially still open, there had been no sign of the missing Douglas Legg. The tragic vanishing still frustratingly unsolved. What happened to him out there? How could he go so completely missing in such a short amount of time? Particularly right under everyone's noses. Did he just get lost, despite the fact that he was within eyeshot of camp? Did he get distracted and roam off into the unknown? Was this all foul play, or was it something else? It seems like only the trees knows the answers to these various questions, and the mysterious vanishing of Douglas Legg remains unsolved, perhaps forevermore.